our voices, our internal voices, the voices of sufficiency or insufficiency, really come from what we choose to feed. If we want to speak our truth without blame or judgment, the most important thing is every day to sort of track those places in ourselves where we go into insufficiency and those places where we go into sufficiency. And if we want to fully speak our truth, then it really is an inside-out job. It's an inside-out job. And it has to come from that place of clarity and foundation. And when we do speak from that place of directness, without hesitation, without just going for it, and sufficiency and confidence, we create impact. And it doesn't have to be big. No, I will not move to the back of the bus. Yes, I will run for president. Who am I to judge? I have a dream. All statements. So I want to tell you, every culture in the world has an origin story. Every culture in the world has a beginning story. I want to tell you my family's origin story, and I'm telling you this partly to honor Rita, who is here, and our family elder who is in the room, because this is the origin story of my family and about what happens when we speak our truth. And it has to do with the story of how my parents met. So I want to let you know that I come from a mixed marriage. That's very important. My mother was a Brooklyn Dodgers fan, and my father was a New York Yankees fan. And that's the way it was in New York City in 1953. Now, my mother was a beauty. She was voted the queen of the school. She was stunning. She was vivacious. But I come from first generation Eastern European Jewish stock, a lot of escaping from the war and the pre-war. And my mother, we were humble. I come from very humble stock. And my mother was vivacious but very protected. We're poor. We didn't have the resources that many of you have. And so she grew up in Brooklyn. And it probably, I think she'd been to Connecticut once, New Jersey once. A big day was Staten Island and Coney Island. It's a big day. And it just never been. And somehow at 18, she managed to talk her parents into letting her go to Miami for spring break. So she went to spring break, and her first night there, in the elevator, she met my father, who was 10 years older than him and was from the Bronx. Met my father in the elevator. They fell in love on a Thursday. He proposed on Sunday, and she said yes. Wow. Yeah. Now, please note, I don't buy a refrigerator until I've researched it for a year. Imagine if your daughter went away and called 4 days later to tell you she was getting married. So my father gets on the phone. He says, "Hello, Ma," and my mother, my mother's mother, says, "Put my daughter back on the phone." And then she gets on the phone. She says, "Bernice, come home." So my mother goes home, my father goes home, and then starts this kind of bridging of the world. So my father first makes the long trip to Brooklyn to talk to his potential future in-laws. And he was wonderful and handsome and charming. I mean, he was really one of the finest men on the planet. One of the things that my cousin and I have been very blessed with is we both had really extraordinary fathers. And they fell instantly in love with him. And so that was great. And then my mother, very little world experience, had to then make the trip to the Bronx to meet her future in-laws. Now, my grandparents on my father's side lived in a fifth-floor tenement in the Bronx. You know, the black and white tiles, that kind of thing. And she walks up the 5 flights. She knocks on the door, and my grandmother, my father's mother, answers the door. Now, let me describe her. They were a very old world. She was from Poland. He was from Germany, my grandfather. She had a very thick Jewish accent. She was about 5'3", 4". She dressed all in black. She had black crepe-soled shoes, which squeaked whenever she walked on her linoleum floor. She had her hair in a white bun and a personality that was described once as being as warm as a pickle. My mother reaches her hand forward and says, she goes, "Hi, Mrs. Baum." My grandmother puts up her hand and goes, "I know who you are, follow me." Turns around and leads my mother into a room that is much smaller than this living room. Remember, we're talking Bronx tenement apartment. And all of the furniture had been cleared out except for 21 chairs, which were around the outside edge, filled with family relatives and friends, and one empty chair in the middle. Remember, 18 years old. She leads my mother, has her sit in the chair, then turns to my mother and says, "Now, Bernice, before you should marry our boy Stanley, we of the family have 2 questions we'd like to ask. What do you want from the family? And what are you willing to give to the family?" Just like this. 18 years old, you imagine. My mother, speak your truth, blame or judgment. She takes about 18 years old. She takes 3 deep breaths, looks the pickle square in the eye. "Mrs. Baum, what I want from the family is your love and your recipes. What I'm willing to give to the family is my love and grandchildren. I have nothing else to offer." There's this long pregnant pause. Everybody's looking at my grandmother. About 10 seconds go by. She goes, "It's a match!" Yeah. So when we come from that place of sufficiency, when we move at the pace of depth, when we listen to that voice, but we really speak what is true for us, it is a very powerful thing. So one very valuable practice that can help you over the next 30 days as you go into to speaking your truth without blame or judgment is to every day ask yourself the following question. As you're in an interaction, ask the following. What would be the more vulnerable and honest thing to say right now? What would be the more vulnerable and honest thing to say right now? And then say it. And see where that takes you in terms of the practice of speaking your truth without blame or judgment.